Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spaghetti Politics, where we explore European politics and people in charge. Our 10-part series will showcase the most influential figures in Europe and people who are currently shaping the landscape of this continent. Kicking things off is Charles Michel, who will be the main focus of my first video. 6th of April 2021. The presidents of top EU institutions, Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel, traveled to Turkey with the hope to relaunch cooperation with their Turkish counterparty, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. What followed was a viral gaffe that took the internet by storm, Sofagate. During their meeting in the presidential palace, a game of musical chairs began. The problem? There were only two fancy chairs for the three leaders. Michel quickly grabbed the one next to Erdogan, leaving von der Leyen without a seat. Twitter was instantly flooded with memes, but the incident has created a stir in politics too, with von der Leyen later claiming that was institutional sexism at play, and while Michel apologized, many commentators saw this as just the tip of the iceberg in terms of deep-seated issues within EU decision-making. Their relationship was already rocky, but their relationship hit an all-time low after the incident. They stopped having their weekly working lunches and went out of their way to avoid each other at all costs. You could cut the tension with a knife. During the EU summit in February of 2023, things got even more heated. The leaders traveled separately, and when an air raid siren went off, von der Leyen had to take shelter in a hotel bunker. Meanwhile, Michel was already at the summit location. After the talks, they even rode the same train back to the Polish borders, but stayed in separate first-class cabins located on opposite ends of the train. This rivalry goes against everything what the EU stands for. Cooperation. It's a far cry from the chummy relationship enjoyed by their predecessors, Donald Tusk and Claude Van Juncker. But this does not explain the dislike for Michel in Brussels. Intense infighting between top EU leaders and institutions is common knowledge inside the bubble. The much more serious accusation is Michel's incompetence. Before we look at the accusation, let's talk a few words about the background of one of the most influential people in Europe. Joe Biden may be the oldest sitting president in the US history, but that doesn't mean he is not at the top of his game. Okay, maybe not at the very top, but some would argue that politicians reach their apex in their old age, drawing on a lifetime of experience. In European politics, age certainly doesn't seem to be as big of a factor. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is just 64. European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde is 67, and EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell is a very respectable 75 years old man. The youngest of these top dogs is Charles Michel, who is just 47 years old. The only younger leader is the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, but even she got the job replacing the late David Sassoli midterm. And let's be real, the European Parliament isn't exactly the first tier of power. So how did Michel rise to the top so quickly? Well, it certainly didn't hurt that his father was already a big name in Belgian/European politics. Michel himself got his start at a young age, becoming the youngest regional minister in Belgian history at just 25 years old. 2 years later, he became the Minister of Development Cooperation in 4 subsequent governments, which may not sound like a lot, but in Belgian politics, that's just 4 years. In 2014, Michel became the youngest prime minister in Belgian history, leading a diverse coalition government that boosted his image as a skilled political operator. The coalition eventually collapsed in 2018, but that was lucky for Michel, because it opened the door to the top jobs in the EU. In 2019, after the elections of the European Parliament, he landed the job of the President of the European Council with ease, thanks to his experience as a former Prime Minister, reputation for striking compromises, and the fact that he is from a small but influential country. What happens when you give a young, ambitious politician a top job? In the case of Charles Michel, the current president of the European Council, the answer seems to be not that much. On the surface, the job of the president of the European Council seems to be simple enough. Run a few meetings a year with the leaders of the EU. Rather than focus on running these meetings, he has turned his attention to ensuring the external representation of the Union on issues concerning its common foreign and security policy. What? Well, instead of his main duties, the Belgian goes all in on the task that allows him to travel. Politico reported that Michel's office requested a budget increase of 500 million euros to cover travel expenses. This seems to be excessive for a person whose main job is to be anchored in Brussels, reaching deals and preparing for council meetings. But to paraphrase a great American thinker, Dana White, first class isn't cheap. It's expensive. You have got to request money. As a result, it has been noted that the European Council meetings are a mess. During a recent summit, the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, criticized Michel for his weak leadership style. Summits do not seem to have any focus, and agreements made beforehand are constantly changed at the last moment. Sensing this weakness at the top, it's no wonder Germany recently chose to walk back on its promise to phase out the combustion engine by 2035. And guess what? The bet paid off. Germany won. Neither has Michel's supposed experience managing a coalition government translated to the apex of politics. Instead, meetings are bogged down in discussions of the fine print of the agreements rather than reaching agreements. As a result, summits often end up in a mess, and they end up in the early hours of the next day. Michel's second term will end soon, but don't expect him to ride off into the sunset just yet. With his track record, it's unlikely that he will land another top position in the EU if the council he represents dislikes him. However, in politics, failure often leads to upward mobility. But what do you think? Is the president of the European Council another do-nothing job that should be given back to the rotating presidency? Or does it have the potential to provide an answer to an age-old question of who do I call if I want to call Europe? Let us know in the comments. And guys, if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this where we talk exclusively about politics and do some in-depth analysis of what's happening behind the curtain. Thank you very much and see you next time.